Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jim Carl. I am the Senior Director of Film Programming at the Carolina Theater of Durham, and also one of the committee members for the OUTSOUTH Queer Film Festival. Thank you so much for being here. And tonight's panel, which is, of course, talking about gender and representation in queer cinema, the gender identity of actors in queer cinema. So we've put together a panel of phenomenal artists that are going to be joining us tonight. Each of them has works screening at this year's festival, and let's just get right to it. Coming up, we have Brittany Devon. Brittany.
Hello. Thanks.
Hi. Where are you joining us from tonight?
Chicago.
Wow, Chicago. So, Brittany, you are an award-winning actor. You're based in Chicago, obviously, and you're a graduate of the Second City Conservatory. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I graduated November 2019, and I had a blast doing it. I love my ensemble. Some of the most creative and funny people I know. It's fun to perform for 3 months on stages at Second City, the same stage that Amy Poehler, Tina Fey, some of my favorites. So yeah, that was awesome to write that show and be a part of it.
You're also a founder of Her Them Productions. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have a production company that normalizes queer content and queer representation and gender identity in cinema. So this is perfect because that's what this is. And just people showing up fully embodied as who they are, and that being enough. So I started a production company with my partner, and I recently wrote a show and filmed the first season and half of the second season called Platonic Girlfriend.
So Total Catch is the film that you have screening with us this year at OUTSOUTH. But if I were an audience member, and this is the first time I met you, this is not your first film, is it? Or is it? Or how many other pieces of work, cinematic pieces of work, have you done?
Oh man, I've probably done about 20 different short films. I've done 4 national commercials, and I was in a TV show a long time ago. But yeah, I just do a lot of independent stuff. And this is my first one I have been part of in this capacity, and am kind of in the forefront of the team, and not just because I'm the only one in the film. So it's been really awesome to be a part of it in that way and really take the reins. All the other ones, if they're a part of any festival, I haven't been able to be a part of anything like this, so it's really cool.
So is it safe to say that filmmaking and everything that goes along with it is not just a passion? This is your career. This is the moneymaker for you. This is what you do for a living and make a living on.
Yes.
Well, that's wonderful. That's not something that a lot of people get to do. So I'm happy that you're able to pursue your passions and make a living at it, which is very important for a working actor.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Next, we're going to bring in Mariella Kai, who only goes by the name Kai, but we're just going to call her Kai. You're an Australian writer and director based in Tokyo, Japan. Where are you joining us from right now?
I'm in sunny Australia right now.
What time is it there?
It's 10:30 in the morning, so I'm still on coffee o'clock.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You said you're in Australia?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Between Us is your debut role as an actor. And Absolutely. You actually play the non-binary Canadian partner in Cailleah's Between Us. Tell us a little bit about your past and why did you choose this particular role to make your debut? Or did Cailleah choose you?
It was very much a joint decision. I initially saw that Cailleah was looking for someone for this role, and I really, really liked what Cailleah had to say about looking for authentic queer people to play this role. And I had absolutely no acting background whatsoever. I'd very much been crew for all of my life. Well, not all of my life, but since I graduated, basically. But the chance to see myself and play myself in a film, because Erin, the character that I play, is almost like, is very close to who I was a few years ago, before I was comfortable in the community, before I was out, before I was really this version of myself. And so it was very, very interesting to draw on those experiences and bring that into the world. And Cailleah really is an amazing director and gave a lot of coaching and basically made it possible to bring those authentic experiences and put them on screen. And so I just thought, this is the one.
So if this is your debut as an actor, what is it that you do for a livelihood?
So for livelihood, I'm a writer-director and I do some camera work as well.
Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and bring in Cailleah Scott-Grimes. Hello, hi.
Hello.
Hi. You're an award-winning Toronto-based director and an illustrator. Where are you joining us from tonight?
I am in Toronto now. Yeah, so we've got a bunch of different things going on right now.
If you're in Toronto and Kai is in Australia, how did the two of you ever even meet?
Well, I also used to live in Japan, which was the whole impetus for making Between Us. We'll probably go into that later. But so Japan was my home, and I was making my master's thesis film. I wanted to go back to this place that I loved and finally tell a queer story of like in this small town that I had lived in. And I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to find people through regular casting agencies. The other character in the film, lead character, is a trans man, and really wanted to find the right person to play that role. And so I can't remember, I think I found you through Facebook or something, Kai. We had a friend, a mutual, someone in camera department who connected us, and you were like a gift that fell out of the sky and like knocked me sideways. And I was in the stage of script development that it was like 90% of the way there, but that character of Erin was weak because I think because she was like based on my experience in so many ways, it's like I wasn't truthful yet with that character. And Kai came forward, and I remember you saying, okay, this is a trans story, and furthermore, what's the identity of this partner, and where are they at? Where is she at? And I think it opened a can of worms for me, which was actually where I had wanted to go all along. And just awesome. Like you changed the script essentially when I met you in many ways. So the internet, people, it's amazing. Yeah.
I think it's interesting as well because I'm one of the only, I think, out filmmakers in Japan, because we met basically through our Japan connections, and
yeah.
I really made a decision early on whether or not my personal life and whether my identity was going to be part of my film life, because I think, different parts of the world are safe in different ways, and Japan is, generally speaking, safe to walk down the road, but you just might not get hired and that kind of stuff. So for me, an early decision was to be, no, I'm going to be 100% my authentic self and show up as a queer person on set, in tech, as crew, and see where that goes. And that's the only way, basically, I managed to connect with Cailleah as well. So I think in the long run, it was the right call, though daunting, or the right kind of decision to make.
Yeah.
So Cailleah, you have an MFA in film production from York University and a BA in visual studies and East Asian studies from the University of Toronto. So again, my question is this something that you do as your passion, your livelihood, or do you do something else? Are you a Caped Crusader at night that goes out to fight crime? What do you do for a living?
I wish. I didn't start off as a filmmaker, and then I think it was like I love too many art forms, and I love music, and I love visual art, and it was just the thing that combines so many elements that I love. So now, yeah, I guess filmmaking is pretty much all I do, and I combine use illustration from time to time to do animated projects, and I work quite a bit as an editor as well. Which is very helpful for directing for me. But I did.
So your film is Between Us,
yeah,
screening this year at OUTSOUTH. Thank you so much. And I'm going to bring in our last panelist for tonight's event, which is Shannon Gibbs.
Hi there.
Hey, Shannon.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to
So
see you.
Shannon, where are you joining us from tonight?
From Los Angeles, from my boss's pool house.
Shannon, you are an award-winning, non-binary identified LA filmmaker, according to your bio, with a passion for collaboration in its many forms. You wrote and star in My Own, which is your short film that's playing at this year's OUTSOUTH, and which also incidentally won the jury award for one of the best short films in this year's festival. The film tackles the nuances of living as a non-binary person in a binary society, and it premiered at the Oxford Film Festival last March. So you recently directed and costumed the short film Bottled Up, which is currently, I guess, making the festival rounds. And you're currently costuming 2 shorts while writing and rewriting an exciting new project that you're planning to shoot this fall. So again, my question to you is, sounds like you come from maybe perhaps a costume background with all of these costumes that you seem to be making. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came about to make this particular short film.
Wow, yeah, it's actually all kind of interrelated, the themes of this film and what ultimately drew me to a pretty fresh career as a wardrobe stylist these days. I think being an assigned female at birth, non-binary person, I grew up with this notion that there were, I just felt sort of funky about girl stuff. I'm sure there are other people here who can relate with that. But my piece is about ballet and this person who doesn't see themselves represented in the male or the female dance and finds themselves having to create their own dance. One of the things that I've felt funky, dysphoric about my entire life is the realm of clothing and women's fashion and things like that, and my place in it. I think I've always had an interest in things like that, but felt sort of, just dysphoric about that world and this idea that part of being a woman is a certain taste level, a certain knowing exactly what one should wear and fashion brands and things like that. And I think I had always wanted to be sort of more out of the box about it and create my own patterns and things like that. My own keeps coming up. But actually during the pandemic, in the first 3 months, when I wasn't able to do any filmmaking, I was thinking to myself, how can I approach character and be entirely alone? And what I found was sewing and cutting patterns and imagining characters that would go into those patterns. And I realized that I had a passion and a talent for costuming that was very non-traditional. For example, I don't like to cut from patterns. I bought myself a mannequin and I started cutting shapes until it started to fit the mannequin. And that way I was discovering the patterns for myself rather than some set idea of, these are women's sizes, these are men's sizes, this is how it should fit the body. And that's sort of the approach with which I look at my styling these days, is completely out of the box, as if you're discovering fashion again in a void, is what I like to do. I think you're muted.
Let me unmute myself here. And I'm just going to introduce this. I'm just going to observe this and not belabor it, because it's something that I found fascinating about yourself, Shannon, and that is you're also the assistant to actress Nancy Stevens. I wanted to make sure to put that in there. Nancy Stevens is from the movie Halloween. She played Nurse Marion, the chain-smoking nurse. And I just thought that was hilarious. I thought that was just marvelous, because one of the other festivals that we produce is the Nevermore Horror, Gothic, and Fantasy Film Festival, which is our sister festival, which is the next festival that we'll start programming immediately after this one ends. So having said that, let's bring in Monique Velasquez, who is going to be tonight's moderator. Monique is a member of she is the chair of the programming committee for the OUTSOUTH Queer Film Festival. And I am going to hand over this panel on gender identity of actors in queer cinema over to Monique.
My assistant cut him off. Sorry, Jim. You got cut off right in the middle. Good evening. Like Jim was saying, I sit on the programming committee, help put together a lot of volunteers. This festival is put on by the theater, which Jim works for, and then we have a cadre of volunteers from the community that helps select these films. It was an interesting time with the pandemic. We're looking to do something a little different with our Q&A to give everybody a chance to talk a little bit about your film and then talk a little bit about some topics to just, get some conversation and a way for you guys to connect. So let's go alphabetical with Brittany. I'm going to start with you and give me a quick little synopsis without giving away too much about Total Catch and your role in it.
So Catch follows Sam, who is a non-binary queer person. And the tagline is, if you think dating's hard, Zoom dating is harder. So you just kind of follow their journey on how they go through all of the ways in the world and then to prepare for something. I don't know how to not give things away. So I'm like,
yeah. Well, it's a mic, what we call a micro, right? Anything less than 3 minutes.
Less than 3
It's hard to make a trailer for something like that.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So let's see. Cailleah, yes. Let's give a little bit about Between Us, and then we'll hit Shannon and then come back to Kai.
Sure, sounds good. So Between Us is a film about a queer Canadian immigrant living in rural Japan and her trans partner, and as they sort of grapple what it means to belong in this small town and whether or not they should stay.
Excellent. Shannon, talk about My Own.
Sure. My Own is about a non-binary ballet dancer being pushed towards coming out in the very binary world of ballet through feelings of dysphoria, watching the men's dance and the women's dance. And it's about them coming out to their mom and finding their own dance.
Great. And Kai, with Between Us, you're coming as a performer inside. Talk about, coming to, participating in OUTSOUTH for one, and then any other festivals you've been with Between Us. Kai.
I portrayed the character Aaron in Cailleah's Between Us, and that was a really interesting role because basically Aaron is as Cailleah mentioned, the Canadian partner living in rural Japan and really wants to connect with community in a place where there is actually a queer community in Japan. So Aaron is feeling very sort of out of place there. That's, basically my role in the film.
Excellent. When we brought you together and you guys, and so the audience kind of gets a feel for what's happened, we asked our filmmakers, our short filmmakers, to self-select for some different topics. And this one is queer identity of actors in queer cinema. And this was something that one of our steering committee members was interested in putting in. We've had two different iterations of this. So this is volume 2, so the second version of this panel. I noticed today, it's a topic, right? In the Los Angeles Times today, there was an article, queer actors are finally playing queer roles. Next up, more chances to play it straight. And so it's kind of this theme, this topic about representation on screen with roles that are not traditional. So, there's some backlash of not casting from the LGBT community for LGBTQ roles. Cailleah, I see you nodding. Give me a little bit of what you're thinking with that idea that you're nodding about. Like, should we follow that, or should we, talk about giving actors representation, and how does that fit into what happened with Between Us? You know, why you specifically went after somebody from the community.
Yeah, I think, well, I think there's never doubt in my mind that I wanted to work with queer people in Japan, I guess, and that in some ways was more of a priority than working with professional actors. So in the end, everybody who was in the film, they were first-time performers. It was their first time on screen. And part of it is because the place I was going back to is somewhere, I mean, the story sort of grew out of my friendship. My best friend while living in Japan was a trans person, but was sort of the only person that I knew who was from the sort of queer community. And it was so invisible in that town that I was living in. And there was sort of like one secret bar that people could go to by word of mouth, you know? And so if you knew about that place, that's like where you could find people. And so I thought that by doing a film, and because it's fiction, that I could bring queer actors to the screen, but without necessarily outing them wherever they were, if that wasn't part of what they were comfortable with or what they wanted to do. And I wanted to find some queer crew as well. And so in some ways, by just posting, you know, what the topic of the film was, it sort of naturally brought in people who had already worked on that kind of material. Like Kai had worked as a part of the crew for Queer Japan, I believe, like feature doc. So I think you were pretty well connected as I was not. But I found it so interesting. Like what I wanted to do first was to interview people. So like rather than jumping into an audition, I was like, let's have a long conversation also so they know who I am and what the heck I'm doing. Cause it's, you know, puts people in a pretty vulnerable position. So I didn't want to just kind of come in and be like, send me a clip of this intimate scene and like be the sort of overlord. Like that's very strange to me. So there was a trans men's bar in Tokyo that's really like a wonderful, friendly place. And the owner of that bar said, well, why don't I just, you know, reach out to the people who come here, see who might be interested, you know, they all might know each other, and see what sort of happens. And I ended up connecting with an actor who, well, I guess he had one stage role. So he had a little bit of experience, and it was just, I don't know, I found that process of doing the interviews so beautiful, also in terms of going back and refining the script so that I wasn't just kind of drawing on the limited experience of this close friend I had and my own experience, but instead like, you know, okay, I talked to maybe 12, 15 people, and what are the sort of threads that I can draw on there to really make the script more, I don't know, to give it more real detail, you know? And so Kai, like I said, I mean, it was just so interesting. For the role of Aaron, a lot of non-queer people auditioned, and that wasn't initially a queer role explicitly. I think I mentioned this a little earlier. It's like I always wanted it to be, but I just like hadn't gotten there in the writing yet. And so that meeting, that first initial meeting that we had, where I think, you know, Kai really went out on a limb. Right. And asked directly, right, you know, like, what about this aspect of this character? And that was so fantastic to me. I thought like a lot of actors, I'm not sure if they would necessarily feel comfortable like reaching out to the director and be like, hey, you want to change,
right, and
change any part of your script or your character? I'm so glad that you did, you know?
Yeah, that was an amazing connection. It's crazy that happened. So let's talk about this a little bit from Shannon and my own. You kind of went a little bit different direction in that you cast yourself. Mm-hmm. And so talk about why you made that choice rather than going outside to some other actor.
Yeah, so when I was first writing, I had always envisioned myself playing the role. And in the writing of it, I was actually coming out. It was my process of coming out was my process of writing it. And by the time I went into pre-production, I was out, and by the time the movie was in post-production, I was public, and by the time it was on the festival circuit, I had changed my pronouns. So I think that what Cailleah was saying about both having a commitment towards casting queer characters, while also an openness to the idea that we're all on our own journeys and that things may develop from these conversations and these stories, and that's part of that too, can be really powerful. My film was directed by a non-binary person who did not identify that way at the time that they directed it. So I think that we both learned a lot about ourselves through the process, and that can be really beautiful too.
Absolutely. So Brittany, after screening Total Catch, one of the things that we check on our boxes was it didn't have any LGBTQ content.
Wait, that was checked for our film?
In my mind, because so it becomes one of those slippery, slopey things, because it's one person on screen and there isn't sort of this, overt, it's a subtext that happens there. So, talk a little bit about that. Can it be considered?
Sarah Clark, who owns Compass Casting, she's a actor in Chicago who is a queer woman. We've been talking about working together for 3 years, and I used to intern for her, and I was like, I always want you to direct me. So she wrote this, she sent me the script, and she was like, I want you to be in this. And she knew that I was very passionate about having to speak to and normalizing queer culture. So it following my character, and at the end, you find out that they're meeting with a girl, but maybe I just gave that away, but whatever. But the whole point that was really important for me was just a person through real emotions and showing up on screen completely who they are without it having to be spoken to. I think there's beauty in both of it. I think there's beauty in speaking to it and in not speaking to it. And I think both of the ways are very crucial in normalizing it in our culture. And that's why I do believe that it is important that people who identify as a specific gender or sexuality do get the chance to tell their stories and be put in those roles as who they are.
Agreed. I mean, we ended up, it got screened, it's got booked, programmed. So ultimately what happens is we recognize that it is the normalization of just somebody living their life. It just happens to be LGBTQ, right? And so, Kai, this is your first role here. Do you think you'll return? Are you afraid you're going to be pigeonholed into this idea of, being the lesbian, the non-binary, the, trans, only role?
I think if that happens, I wouldn't see it as pigeonholed exactly. I would see it as an incredible opportunity to make more it's a huge community, and there are so many different stories within that. And I think for me, it's more about telling those stories, and whether it's in front of the camera, whether it's behind the camera, I think in so many ways we need more, not only queer narratives, but queer filmmakers. And if I made only queer content for the rest of my life, I think I would still have a lot to say, and I think the world would have a lot to see, a lot to experience, just even within that community. Simply because I think there's texture in filmmaking, and when it comes down to even kind of beyond, as Brittany was saying, like even beyond kind of the overt queer narratives within a film structure, even when you look at queer camera work or queer editing, there is a texture, I think, in making a film where there's an aesthetic, there's a rhythm, and there's just a richness. And in concrete terms, for instance, not portraying people necessarily as binary, not showing people's silhouettes in a way that's very masculine or feminine. There's so many ways we're used to seeing people as kind of these two separate entities. And I think, if I could get pigeonholed, I'd be delighted.
Well, this is interesting because the first iteration of this panel, it was older, skewed older, and they tended to believe that they weren't going to pursue sort of like having that as being like the number one checkbox, and that they were afraid to ask character or the folks coming in auditioning about whether they're in the LGBTQ community, because they didn't want to get them not blacklisted, but getting, putting them into a position where they might not get work, which is very interesting compared to. Go ahead, Shannon.
I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and how even if I were cast as a cis female role, I still think that my portrayal there would be an energy to it. There would be a representation to it. I've been thinking a lot about how casting in general needs a bit of a reframe, as does society, right? And I want to live in a world where my appearance and my energy are taken into account with the same levity in the casting room. So there's my appearance, and that's relevant to casting. And then there's my gender identity, which is also relevant to casting. And one example that I've really been thinking about, just in terms of reference points for my own career, is, we know that non-binary people, when they come out, they've been non-binary, right? It's just a coming out, or, trans mass people, etc. And I think about Elliot Page and Juno, and how they had a genderqueer energy in that film that brought so much humor and heart to it. And they were, I believe, cast for that reason and with that energy in a way that the casting directors couldn't probably put words to. But casting for energy and the gender energies that we bring to things, although there haven't been words for it, is something that's always been done. And now we can reframe it with pride.
I think the Los Angeles Times article that came out today, I think you'll find interesting, that supports that idea. Go ahead, Brittany.
I just want to speak on what Kai and Shannon both said. And I feel that as a non-binary, and I'm speaking for myself, but I also, the community, as a non-binary person and a queer person, there is a level of breaking away from the binary, seeing the world through new eyes and with new energy. So no matter where on set or how those people show up in in the media, in the world, like, that is so extremely important for that specific energy, that specific viewpoint and way to be brought forth and to really be harnessed, because I feel like it opens so many minds. And I've been thinking about this too, with like producing content and meeting more queer artists, and like I feel like, similar to Kai, like, if I only did queer stuff the rest of my life, great. Like, that is awesome, because I want to, community is so supportive, and that community is unlike anything that I know. And so I want to be a bigger part of it, and I want to break down the systems in the way the world has seen the binary, has seen media, has seen representation. And there's so much to do in that. I feel what they're both saying, and I think it's important, no matter the role, that that energy is brought to the sets and then transferred through to the screens.
Yeah, in the documentary community, they have this saying, it's called "not about us, without us." So it's, I think that kind of translates to a little bit of this. Now, how do you feel, like, Kai, about cis, straight folks playing queer roles? Just as an opinion, it's not something, it's an evolving idea. So
I think it's a missed opportunity. That's how I authentically feel about it. Because, as I said before, there are so many, and what Shannon said really beautifully as well, is there's an energy to offer. And I think it's also looking at, there's this whole aesthetic and whole energy out there that I think can add something very interesting to a film. And I think if if you're writing queer characters, I think at the very, very minimum, you should have someone who's, you know, either director or writer or actor who has lived as an LGBTQ person and who actually understands in the flesh, basically, what that's like. Because I think it's very easy to just see the struggles or just see pride or just see like what a facet, but to kind of really have lived the ups and downs of acceptance in the community and the kind of found family of the community and support of that, but also have lived the fear of, you know, not being accepted, the fear of, you know, getting hurt in the street or not getting hired and that kind of thing. I think there are those life experiences, but they're very out of the box. As Shannon was saying again, you know, out of the box kind of aesthetic about everything in that life. And I think, I basically think it's a missed opportunity that a film can so much benefit from a very different view of the world, and bringing that to a film is something that is extremely valuable.
Does anybody else want to chime in? No? Come on. Go ahead, Shannon.
I also think that writing representation, even more than acting representation in the current climate, is so important. The other day I posted something on an Instagram story, the statistic that there were no trans or non-binary leads in a feature film in the last 4 years. A straight cis white male got back to me and said, well, female and non-binary is included on all the casting calls and nobody wants white guys anymore, which, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. But what I told him, one of the things I told him of many, was that we were talking about writing representation, right? Like you can slot a non-binary character into a sci-fi story. That's one thing. But there's a really important thing missing there if we don't have stories with trans and non-binary people in the center, written and developed by studios and production companies.
I think it goes back to Brittany, you know, sort of normalizing, you know, human stories. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, and I just want to go off of that and say that that's something I've known. I was out for over a year myself and my partner and my close friend before I made a decision to my agents, and I knew change things, and I was excited once I did, but I didn't want to be like a motivating thing for them or twisted in any way, and I just really wanted to embody and root that for myself. And once it was kind of like this feeling of, they're non-binary, throw them in the room. And all of the scripts that I would get it was very clear that it wasn't written by someone who understood. And it would speak to it. And that's kind of where my passion about just existing as who I am and also being that in the world would kind of came from. But every script I would read, it was like, I am not a woman, or I am non-bi, and it had to say it. And I was like, what else is saying it? Who else on screen is saying that in that same way? It just wasn't in a supernatural. So I'm just saying that to say that, like, in the writers' rooms, I feel like it is very important for that representation as well. And I've just seen that in the auditions and the scripts through major networks that I think it's really important to expand out and to really make that a huge topic as well.
Well, I mean, that goes back to, you're given these scripts and you feel this less than authentic voice being, on the page. You don't want to turn down something if it's offered. So how do you proceed with the idea there that it may not be a true authentic? You go on and you hope to influence because of your presence. Kai, Shannon, anybody? Go ahead, Kai.
So I think what Cailleah was saying earlier about my character not initially being queer, I think with my beautiful disrespect for boundaries, was like, but this character is queer. And I think what I saw in the character was very much this relationship. And I think, Cailleah, please jump in and sort of redirect things. But at least my reading was very much that initially, sure, the trans man in the story was having more issues around his sexuality and his gender identity, more to the point. And as the film kind of progressed a little bit, that came more about he's totally fine, very comfortable, but his partner, me, is actually the one who's really struggling being in the middle, and this kind of struggle of being in that center space and kind of not having a firm identity at that point. And I think I brought a lot of that to the kind of arguments that we had in the film, and a lot of the energy within the relationship was very much those struggles. Cailleah, do you want to jump off the back of that?
Sure. Yeah. I guess first of all, maybe this is just my approach, but I wish that directors would just so explicitly offer that invitation for feedback, especially if you're the one who's written it and you have total creative control over, what ultimately, I think it's kind of your responsibility to go in and say, even if you are queer identifying, for example, but if the person you're bringing in has a really different experience or is in some other, wants to bring something different to the role, I think it's so important to invite that. And yeah, I think it was such an odd experience for me, because at first when people would ask, what's your motivation for wanting to make the film? And of course there's all this stuff about the connection to Japan and these deep friendships of mine and everything. But it was like, it took me so long to get to that truth of like, that there was something that was like hiding, that I had been like hiding for so long. And so in a way, it's almost like I feared judgment from within the LGBT community initially, because I didn't know what to call myself or how to like clearly identify what that piece was that felt so important to me to bring out, which of course is not what ended up happening. Like, I don't know why I was worried about that, because people have been so fabulous, but that initial fear was kind of there.
Yeah, it was a very authentic story. We appreciate that. Shannon.
No, I was just offering snaps. I definitely.
Agreed. It was a very authentic story. Well, we have to wrap up some things, but let me go to Cailleah, back to you between us. Tell us, I want to give you a chance to say, where you can see you in the future, other film festivals or next projects that you might come back with at OUTSOUTH.
Did you say my name? Sorry, I missed that.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, good. Oh yeah, we're so excited to be part of a bunch of festivals right now. We're Outfest LA and in Hawaii, and in actually our Japan premiere is coming up too. Finally, after so long, at the Kansai Queer Film Festival. Yeah, a couple other like international ones coming up, and then well, I'm actually directing music videos next.
Okay.
Some Japanese music videos. So that'll be a whole.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Kai, what's next for you?
I'm currently writing. I'm hopping back behind the camera for a bit, and I'm writing a feature film that is a sci-fi narrative about two female main characters in a relationship and how they're dealing with the apocalypse.
Apocalypse, of course. Shannon, give us what's next for you, and whether you're coming back to OUTSOUTH or next for my own.
I'm styling a series of music videos for trans talent, which I just signed with, talking about being represented accurately, which feels very good and euphoric for me. Cool. And I'm working on a pilot where I play the Grim Reaper, and several of the characters I've written have they, them, or they, he, or they, she pronouns. And I think everyone should write more like that.
All right. And Brittany, Total Catch. Tell us what's next and what's up for you.
This end of this month will be also at Los and that Queer Festival, and then East Village Queer Festival, Long Beach Queer Film Festival. I've been working on my platonic girlfriend, just seeing what comes next.
Well, I hope to see all of y'all back at Out South. We appreciate that you found us and that you were willing to submit to Out South. It has, it's the South, so there is some baggage with that. But we love our filmmakers, and we can't wait to see you come back with new stuff. All right, I'll see you all backstage, and we'll say our goodbyes after we go off live.
Thank you for having us.